there's no reason to take a big chance. You can test it out, then you can metric it. You try 3 or 4 people, if it's legal, buy them glasses or whatever it would be, and you see how much business flows from it. If it's zero, you're out a few dollars. If it's multiples of that, and then you project what that business is worth, not just one time, but over forever, then you do more of it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Eugene Shatsman, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's episode of the Power Hour. So Power Hour has been optometry's longest running show and one of the most listened to podcasts, certainly in our industry. And if you're just joining us for this season, just know we've surveyed our listeners and we're excited to make sure that this season is really something that's based on your feedback. And if you're just joining for the first time this season, you truly are in for an amazing show. The content we're going to bring you throughout the season is going to be content that helps your practice find untapped potential. That means showcasing unique perspectives, uncovering hidden opportunities, and we're going to do this with panel discussions this season. We're going to do this with expert interviews with people who have insight into the industry's hottest topics. But one of the most exciting things that I want to share with you is guests from outside of the optometric industry, because we can engage in conversation around things that really matter for anyone who's running a business. And I want to bring you people who have been there, done that. And today I'm just so excited to welcome Jay Abraham, who truly is somebody who has been there and has done that with so many industries and so many businesses. I think he has advised tens of thousands of businesses. He has helped, he has been a resource for over 1,000 different industries. And I think he is now known as the close to $50 billion in profits, not revenue, from his clients, right, Jay?
It's actually, without sounding arrogant, it's exceeded that by now.
That's amazing. And that's all over the course of the last few decades that Jay has been a resource for businesses, large and small. And certainly his methodology, his proven philosophies have truly been a huge asset for folks like, Tony Robbins is one of Jay's mentees. Daymond John from Shark Tank, that you may know, credits a lot of his success to help that he's gotten from Jay Abraham. And Jay, thinking about this concept of you being able to help lots of different industries, why should people really tune in today of all days as you share some of your wisdom?
Well, I think the real reason is that I've been very privileged, Eugene, to travel outside of any industry and be able to interact with people in over 1,000 industries, not businesses. And what I've seen is that most people who spend their whole life in one industry or profession, very dedicated, very, very qualitative people, but all they know is what that industry does, plus or minus about 10, 20%, they're better or worse in their performance. They're limited to incremental growth. But when you borrow success approaches from outside an industry, you've got a massive, massive advantage. And the thing I learned when you start looking at how many different ways there are of attracting buyers, of strategy, business model, how many ways you can preemptively establish your business in the eyes of a market, how many ways you can generate referrals, how many ways you can repurpose somebody, how many ways you can ethically increase the profitability of a transaction, you realize that most people in a reasonably successful business or practice are actually what we call successfully stuck. They're content with what we would call status quo thinking, unintentionally, not penalizing them. It's just not their fault because they don't know how much more is possible from time, effort, opportunity, money, people, opportunity to reach people, market access, buyers, prospects. And I've gotten to see the highest, best ways to do almost everything. And I bring that to any kind of a client or any kind of an industry or any kind of a group. I don't know if that's a good answer or not.
Well, that's been phenomenal, Jay. And that's why we're so glad to have you on the show today. So, and for our listeners, just so you know, I could probably go on for about an hour just singing Jay's accolades or clinically going through his, CV or his accomplishments. So instead of doing that, I think there's a video that we can post into the show notes if you really want to know a little bit more about some of the things that Jay has accomplished or learn more about some of the things that Jay is working on. Having said that, though, Jay, there are some key methodologies and really things that translate to any business that I want to get into today. And I think the most foundational one has to do with just understanding how to grow a business. What would you tell people if they're looking to grow a business?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is there's no reason whatsoever you have to grow businesses incrementally. You can grow a business much more closer to exponentially by working on the geometry of business. You can work on the geometry of business. When you do that, you compound the performance of everything you do. It's rather explosive, and you start getting asymmetric upside performance, and it's very, very easy to de-risk the downside. And when you have those two working together, it's rather profound. I mean, think about this, Eugene. 10 plus 10 plus 10 is 30.
Right.
10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. Very different dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Same tens, just how you put them together, isn't it?
Right. So what are the three ways to grow a business, Jay?
Well, as you already know, because we have a really nice relationship, and I've admired what you've done in your industry. There's three basic ways, and there's three advanced ways, and I'll list them very quickly. But I should probably give you a context. Everyone thinks there must be a million ways to grow a business, and there probably are a near infinite number of tactics. But as far as ways to grow a business, three basic, three advanced. Here's what they are. First, you increase the number of buyers, in your case, patients, clients, or prospects that you convert. I mean, both of those are the same. Number two is you increase ethically the size of the transaction and thus the profit it produces. And the operative word is ethically. Number three, you increase the frequency of purchase, how many times they come back in a certain timeline. Or if you don't have anything really logical in your own repertoire, you increase what's called the utility value. The other ethical operative word is always ethical, because everything we do is preeminent. It's the top of the pinnacle of qualitativeness and integrity. But you find other ways to add value with products or services that you can acquire, or you can partner with, or you can create. And when you do all that, we have models and you can put it up there, but a mere 10% increase across all three of those can produce a 33% increase in your aggregate revenue, which might double profit. If you were able to double the numbers you had right now, it's more like 100% increase in your revenue, and off the chart in earnings, profitability, EBITDA, whatever you want to denominate it. So it's working on the geometry of the business. The other three ways, the more advanced three ways, are you penetrate a new market or a niche every year. You introduce a new product or service every year. It can be very valuable, and I'll explain why in a minute. Or you acquire, the third is you acquire a product, company, or distribution every year. When you do all six of those, the result over a relatively rapid timeline, it's not going to happen tomorrow morning, but it's not going to take a decade, is your business can just keep multiplying, compounding. And that's what we've done, as you know, for client companies in so many industries around the world. It's not that I'm that brilliant, it's that the methodologies are that universal.
And let me just translate that for just a second for our listeners. So first way is getting more patients, right? So you just let's just do the basics and think of if we could just increase our patient volume by 25%. And then, is that possible? Is that doable for a typical practice? And in my experience, that's extremely, there are lots of different ways that you could do that, and that's extremely doable for most practices. Then you think about, as Jay was talking about, average transaction size, you increase that by 25%. Well, that could be working on your capture rate. That could be reducing the number of exam onlys. That could be thinking about all the different premium opportunities that you have, whether that's frames, lenses, second pair sales, AR, blue light, whatever, right? It could also be specialty services in your practice. And then the third, getting patients to come back more often. There are so many, every recall system, the great thing about the eye care space is that people need to come back to get more glasses, right? And every recall system that I have ever looked at, they tend to do a job, but it's oftentimes that it looks like a leaky bucket and just got holes that, just plug a few of those holes and you just keep more water in that bucket. So I think to really highlight the power of this methodology, if you can increase by 25% every one of those categories, which I think is very doable in a typical practice that at least I interact with, you can double your business. And that's probably doubling your business without doubling your rent, without doubling a lot of your fixed costs, without doubling the power or the time that you have to spend managing that business. And so that's really a profound opportunity. And then you get into Jay's advanced 3 ways. And would you mind saying them one more time, Jay, just to, for those taking notes? I know the second nature to you, but I think that I wanted to slow it down for a second to make sure that everybody got it.
Yeah. And I'd like with respect to make a little comment to what you said. So everybody, unless they're very unique, wants to grow, and they want to grow revenue, but they really want what revenue growth means, which is profitability. But what we learned early in our career, the we is me, I just talk in the multiple, is that if you don't change the dynamics you've got now, in order to double your business, let's say you don't change any of the things I talked about, you're going to need more staff. You're going to need, if right now you get only a certain amount of revenue per transaction, you get only a certain amount of people coming in, you want to double that, you're going to have to normally double facilities, people, capital outlay. But when you work on the other 2 ways, most people think only about getting more clients in the door, more patients in the door. That's the slowest, the most expensive, the most time demanding. But once you get them, selling them more ethically, selling them more often ethically, getting more utility costs you nothing. And you're not adding any more people when you do that. So it's a really interesting dynamic. But the other 3 are, number 1, you penetrate a new market or niche every year. Number 2 is you introduce a new product or service every year. And the reason why is very powerful. Number 1, if it's modest, it is a more attractive, what I'll call front end, an easier way to get more people to come in and start a relationship. Number 2, depending on what the price point and what it is, you could add it to each transaction. It may not double revenue, but it could double or triple profit. The third is it could be a product extension that could double your marginal net worth, your lifetime value. And when you have increased lifetime value, Eugene, that gives you more allowable costs to invest to bring people in the front door. So it's very powerful, holistic type of a process.
Well, and it's interesting when you talk about this allowable cost. I want to zoom in on that for just a moment because it allows, I think, and I've heard it referred to, and I think you've referred to it in the past as the blank checkbook marketing strategy, right? You have a blank check marketing strategy because you understand what, Jay?
You understand that up to a certain, as long as you know what we call the golden numbers, you've got to know that you got to know a couple of things. 1, all leads, all patients, all sources, all ads aren't worth the same. The people coming aren't the same people. So you've got to know the relative value of different categories of prospects or patients or buyers, however you categorize them. Once you know that and you are able to compute a reasonable lifetime value, how many times they're going to come back, what they're going to be worth, the profit minimal, not maximum. That way you're always not surprised. You're always going to be impressed. Then, and you know how much you can afford to invest. I don't believe there's any such thing as spend. You are an investor in your practice or your office, whether you believe it or not, Eugene. Everything you do is going to produce a yield. If you know that every time you bring a first-time patient in, that patient in the course of a year is worth X amount of profit, but in the course of 5 years, it might be 10 or 20 or 30X, and that doesn't factor in any new products, services, any upgrades that come to, the different kinds of lenses or frames. Then your goal should be not just to make as much static profit as you can, but to invest to bring in as many people who will recurringly keep going through the system. And we call that the difference of being a 2D or 3D entrepreneur, or in your case, a doctor or optical professional. And what it means is this: most people look at business in a very static way. All they look at is revenue minus expense equal profit. It's very static. Mm-hmm. We don't do that. We get people to say, look, we look at yield. We look at return we get on an asset. And an asset can be a salesperson. An asset can be an ad. An asset can be a referral source. An asset can be a patient over a period of time, the way that a hedge fund or a private equity fund, but they don't look at it one time. They look at what that asset is going to keep recurringly earning them, and they invest for that asset accordingly. And if you look at it with that kind of a shift in mindset, it opens up vistas. So, for example, if you know that every time someone comes in for $100 exam, that 80% are going to buy at least $400 pair of glasses, you're going to make $200 on it. So every time X comes in, that's the first one. And you know that 80% of those people are going to come back in year 2, and that 80% of them are going to come back in year 3, et cetera, et cetera. You compute all that, and then you decide how much of the $100 or more than the $100 you're willing to invest to bring that patient in for the lifetime yield they would produce for you. And that doesn't even factor in all the upgrades you can do when you understand this kind of methodology. And you do, because I know you've adapted it to your industry, and I know you explode people by using it. It's very predictable. The best thing about my methodology, we have fun words. They're all portable, meaning they will translate, and they have around the world every kind of profession, every kind of industry. The other is when you interrogate your business, which is really analyzing it at a very, very ruthless way, you uncover all kinds of opportunity, all kinds of gaps, all kinds of data that tells you all kinds of opportunities you can capitalize on.
Well, and it's interesting for that point, and I really wanted to simplify this as much as possible. I know you told me once a story about a furniture store that you were working with, right? It was
Sure.
And those guys, I mean, you taught them to measure everything right down to the greeting, right?
Yeah. Normally, we look at all the levers in we look at a revenue system. Everyone's got a revenue system, Eugene, whether they recognize it or not. There's all these factors that come together to produce the revenue, the profitability. And most people do look at certain KPIs, but only a few. There are all kinds of other ones going on. A macro process almost always has 5, 8, 10 sub-processes driving it, each one of those that can be measured, quantified, improved. But we look at everything and we question everything. But just to give you an example, and this works for us for advertising, and it works one-on-one, because advertising is nothing more than salesmanship or womanship multiplied. But basically, we test, first of all, how you start the selling interaction, whether they're calling you in to get an appointment or get information, whether they're walking in, whether you're setting it up for a transaction they've already committed to. We did a test, just as an example, for a very large furniture store that was getting about 1,000 leads or walk-ins every month, and we tested 33 different ways of greeting people at the front door.
So you tested 33 different ways to greet a person who walked in the door, and you said one of them tripled the amount of success?
Yes, 3 times the closes. By the way, it had a higher unit of sale and more repeat. And I'll tell you what it was. It was this company had run a lot of ads every Sunday to drive people in the newspaper. And the winning script, or the winning phrase was, "And what ad brought you into the store today?" And we just threw it in there as some of the other hypotheses we tested. But what we found out was, after we analyzed why it works so well, if you say, "Hey, hi, can I help you?" What am I going to say always?
Oh, no, I'm just looking around. Yeah.
Right. But if I say, what ad brought you into the store today? Unless you're really agile-minded, if you're an honest person, you're going to answer the 4-piece Italian bedroom set. It gives the salesperson, the sales professional, the ability to take a leadership role and engage. And he or she will say, "Wow, so is the rest of the house Italian? Did you just move? Did one of your children just, maybe graduate school, get out? I mean, are you moving to an apartment, downsizing?" And you hope you don't have a sad story to it, but if you do, you're empathic. But that's just one thing. We also test positioning, both in how you sell, but also how you advertise. We test how you prove your claim or your positioning. We test risk reversal, how you take away reticence or uncertainty or apprehension. We test bonusing. We test restating the proposition. And by the way, headlines, or the equivalent is the first paragraph or two that not just your salesperson in an office or a store, but it's the person that answers the phone, the person that sets the appointment. Really, frankly, it can be the professional who's doing the exam. What they say can have as much as, it won't usually, but can have as much as a 2,100% differential. We've seen price differences very modest. I've seen $49.95 outpull $5,000 by 20%. I've seen $19 outpull 15 by 300%. I've seen the opposite too. So you have to test. But there's about 8 denominators in both selling and in advertising. And by the way, the equivalent of a headline is obviously self-evident, but the same thing. You can change your subject line. You can change the messaging you leave somebody. You can change the first phrases that they see on your website. I mean, you can change, if you happen to show at trade shows. I don't know if any of them do. You can change your signage. You can change what people say when they walk by to get the right people and not waste your time on the wrong ones. We've done massive testing on this, but when you think about it, and this is where it gets pretty exciting, and this is what turned me on. I was exposed, as you know, they don't know, but you know this. I've helped, besides 1,000 industries, I've helped 300 of the world's top experts. None of them came to me, Eugene and audience, for help with their methodology. They came for help to command more preeminence, to command more value, to close more people. But I had to understand the methodology first. And I was fortunate. Some of the earlier experts were all into analysis, all into data, all into variability. And variability is profound. I mean, just as variability exists in the eye, no two eyes are probably the same, and that's why they keep doing all this. There's enormous variability in what you do, how you say it. And there's all this interrelated, like this upside leverage. I analogize it this way, which is sort of, you like to simplify it, and I tend to get a little too esoteric. Our personal lives, Eugene and audience, have been enhanced and dramatically improved qualitatively by levers, wheelbarrows, brooms, screwdrivers, light switches, car door openers, pop-top cans, cranks that open doors. But in our business, we've always had all these levers. No one's ever showed us that we can basically pull and turn. And each one, if it only gives you a 10 or 15% increase, there's as many as 60, but easily there's a dozen in any business or practice or optical facility. And if you've got 10 tens, that's explosive. And that's just a 10%. You have seen, and I've seen, sometimes there's easily double. So I don't want to get too esoteric, but I hope that makes sense.
This is phenomenal, Jay. And I think, the reason I asked to talk a little bit about just testing a greeting, because I think your methodology requires people to think about their business as an investment. And as an investment, you would want to look at the different parts of that investment and say, how is this performing? And it's just even that little mindset shift of saying, I want to be thoughtful about everything that I do, and I want to evaluate whether everything that I do is giving me maximum, as you're talking about leverage, maximum leverage in my business, right? If that screwdriver could turn a little bit faster, a little bit better, or could accomplish the job in half the time, would that be beneficial to me? Of course. So then look at all the different levers inside of your business. So, you were talking about, we were just zooming in on one thing you can do that can kind of fit into that category of three ways to grow a business, or the advanced three ways.
And just to liberate and hopefully excite your audience. In the first category, we have, and they're universal. So, and Eugene knows them. So we have 21 or 25 ways that are pretty applicable. In the second, there's at least 18, and in the third, a little bit less to do it right. There's probably 12 that relate to just increasing frequency with what you're doing. And then there's an infinite number of ones literally you can do if you want to get more utility. But failure to do any of them is, I think, a travesty or a tragedy, whatever the word is. Here's something I wanted to say to you, because you hit on something I'm very close to. Your business should be looked at like a hedge fund. A hedge fund manager has a portfolio of asset classes he or she puts in it. And they're there because they have different levels of risk and different levels of yield or reward. Mm-hmm. And they're constantly managing, and they're constantly replacing if there's too much risk and not enough reward, too much risk and not enough reward. But most people don't look at their business or their practice or their office like a hedge fund, but everything you do is an investment. You're taking risk, you're accepting yield. If you don't know the yield you're getting on anything you're doing, or some of the things you're doing, or people that are doing it, then you are most often sub-optimizing. But if you had an investment advice, let's say you had something you don't even realize you put 30 or 40% of your opportunity cost in. An opportunity cost is an asset. So is access to market. So is time. So is everything. And all these can be monumentally increased in the yield, and they can be dramatically reduced in risk. But let's say that you didn't even realize you had something you were allocating 40% of your opportunity cost to. That's giving you a 6%, 8% yield, and you've got about 30% risk, and you got something else over here. It's only 10% opportunity cost, and it's 50 and almost no, and you don't even know to allocate it. And the analogy we have, again, I don't want to be too sophisticated, is if you had an investment advisor and he was mismanaging your portfolio and giving you more risk than you should have taken and less yield or negative yield, you'd get rid of it all the time. We talk about inactive or past buyers or patients the way we would an investment portfolio that's basically eroding. Mm-hmm. We say, okay, you probably got a sunk cost, whether you acquired them through advertising or effort or allocated of opportunity costs. Let's say you have 5,000, 10,000 people and half aren't active. Well, it's like saying I'm giving my investment advisor, $500,000 and saying I'm happy if next year it's worth only 400,000, and I'm happy if the next year you can run it down to about 250,000. I'm
Right.
trying to, that's how we look at it. I hope that sounds sensible.
Absolutely. And I think, even that having that level of discipline in evaluating your business in general is helpful because, just you think about it, well, am I doing those things? And, it's also interesting to me as you kind of hit on the advanced three ways to grow. And I thought, man, just bring in a few other examples outside the optometric because, people don't get a chance to hear this kind of stuff all the time. So, I was thinking adding a product. Wasn't there a Japanese driving school or something that you advised?
Yeah, sure. Be happy to. Pretty good story. So, I mean, I've advised all kinds of, in Japan, I had the #1 driving school in Tokyo. They had 3 offices or three facilities, and it's a very unique business. Finding the right audience is difficult as heck because it's only someone about 18 to 26, and it's a one-time transaction, and it's like 3 or 4,000, but they make about a $1,000 gross profit when they're all done. And there's almost nothing else. These people come back. They try defensive driving and other things. Nobody does it. But then when you analyze the data, and the data always speaks when you ask it the right questions. When I did it, we found out that half the people that get their license do nothing with it. It's nothing more in Japan but a badge of honor. I got a driver's license. The half that do something, half of them buy a car, but the other half rent cars on the weekends and holidays. And they're 20 to 26 when they start. The life expectancy in Japan, I don't know what it is. Let's say
I think it's higher than ours.
Okay, but let's say the driving, the rate of the lifetime driving is
Okay,
maybe
fair.
60.
Yeah.
Okay, so do the numbers. So from 20 to 60 is 40 years people are going to rent. And I said to them, you guys understand it. The real opportunity here is to have car rentals. And if you do that and you lock people in, you're going to have them for 40 years. And we did it, and it multiplied business tremendously. But then we had a methodology that was so unique that we were able to take it all over Japan to non-competitors, and the only competitors were in Tokyo, and partner with them. And we made so much more from doing that, but it's looking at correlations. I've had clients that bought complementary. They bought products people bought before, during, after. We've had clients that got into businesses people bought before that were much lower cost, and they sold that product for a little loss so they could preemptively get access to that prospective buyer or patient ahead of everybody else. We've had people buy access vehicles, discussion groups, podcasts. We've had people buy, high-priced talent, salespeople. I've had lots of cosmetic surgeons hire away the top injector from med spas because they have a following of maybe 800 people. And as long as my cosmetic surgeon has a place for them, the moment, then we give them most of the money because we wanted the patients. The moment they would move there, they'd bring their 800 patients. Could cost us nothing because we're just giving them the revenue and some space. And we would get enormous cases from it, but it's just thinking differently.
Absolutely, and that's really interesting. You're hitting on a key point. And by the way, in the optometric space, there's a lot of specialty services you can add, and there's also several adjacent industries. We're going to have a panel in a few weeks on the on aesthetics, on adding aesthetics to your practice. We're going to have a panel on dry eye, myopia, some of the hotter topics, but then also other specialty services that could be things that almost a business within a business or a sub business if you run it right. But it's also interesting that you hit on a number of those examples. I think you're probably well known. I mean, you're well known for a lot of things, Jay, but I think that a lot of people refer to you as the godfather of joint venturing and power partnering in a business. So, some of the examples you just talked about is kind of interesting, jotted my memory, and I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to hear your perspective on building power partnerships in their business too.
Sure. Yeah, I've done about, $1 billion for myself and clients, but I've helped other people do about the same. So there's about 43 ways to do it. And the first concept is you want to find, there's 2 ways to look at it. Who else has uh, the trusted direct access to the same audience you want? It's not competitive, and can be ethically incentivized and motivated once they believe you really are a superior provider to constantly, not just one time, but constantly recommend your product, service, company, whatever, to their audience. And then how many and how do you do it? We've done it many ways. When it's ethical, when it's professionally doable, we find organizations, we find media, we find influencers, and we give them a fair share, usually on the first sale, because we play the long game. But you don't have to. When you can't ethically do it, we do reciprocal. We have a great story, and I think it's actually right on your alley. Many years ago, I taught this to a very large group, and within it was a middle class trust. He was not middle class, but his audience was middle class trust and estate. He was basically selling, estates, but not to wealthy people, to people that are, middle class. And we also had a very prominent ophthalmic surgeon. He was in early stages of LASIK. And they were thrilled about the concept, but ethically they couldn't pay each other anything. It would be a breach of their ethics and be illegal, and they could be arrested. Mm-hmm. So what they did was they just did a reciprocal, and both of them, they made certain that they trusted that each was a very qualitative, highly ethical provider who in good faith would do a better service, in their opinion, for the patients or the clients than the alternative. And they basically endorsed they did a reciprocal endorsement, and both of them made over $100,000 extra in about 3 months' time. So that's something. You can also, depends. There are people that have products or services you partner with that can bring those products or services to you. You don't have to inventory them. You can even get them to, to pay for marketing. You can get partnerships with vendors where you get them to put money up to test different selling or marketing, or pay for a person in your store or your office. I mean, there's many ways to do it. I mean,
actually, to that last point you just had, we both have a mutual client, you and I, who did exactly that. And for folks who are thinking, oh, well, this will never apply to me. Absolutely not. We have a client who decided that he was going to buy out his competition in his area. And that competition was using a particular lab. Many of you would know the name. And he approached that lab and said, I have my own lab. And so when I buy these guys, I'm probably going to switch them to my own lab. However, if you happen to be comfortable with the concept of a prebate, and you can lend me the money that you would give me potentially as a rebate, but if you just lend me the money, which I'll get back when we do the volume with you, I'll commit to doing volume with your lab, and you'll commit to giving me the money I need to buy these practices. And so he ended up buying these practices for almost no money out of pocket as a result of just kind of thinking about who else benefits from my success, which I think is one of the core tenets that you teach when you think about partnering, right?
Right. There's also different kind of partnerships. You can do partnerships with manufacturers who want to sell you something, and if they have a lot of inventory, or you're a very high-profile provider, you can get them to provide it for you, and instead of paying the purchase sale, can pay you, as long as it's legal, so much a usage, so much a transaction. You can do it's amazing the spectrum that is available when you have this mindset. And it can double, redouble, because as I said, well, I'll tell you what we've done. We took, just to give you the power of it, we know, and I happen to know the details, as you do too, about your client. I mean, he did something like 30 different interpretive ways that he uses. He got manufacturers to do stuff with him. He did everything imaginable, and it really blew up in the very best way. Not blew up bad. He went boom like that. Yeah, you can basically partner with media, and if you can't legally share cases, you can usually, and I'm not an attorney, you can pay for leads. You can partner with with other distribution. By the way, I don't know the legality, but we have many times gone into a market where it was legal and bought influencers the services of whatever it was, whether it's Botox or with glasses or whether it's something else. And all we ask in exchange is if we really blew their mind with our professionalism, our superiority, tell all the people that they have influence. By the way, an influencer in the kind of profession you are talking to, it can be the bank, but it can be also the nail salon, it can be the restaurant, the high-end restaurant that knows everybody. It can be all kinds of people you never think about.
Well, right. And you think about there is structured influencer marketing, because I think when people hear the word influencer today, they might be thinking about social media influencer.
No.
And that exists, but that was I would say that's a derivation of a strategy that, because everybody is approaching the guy with 10 million likes on YouTube.
And that's not the opportunity.
I agree.
The opportunity is all the merchants in your community.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the people who have access to the same people that you want access to.
And by the way, any hypothesis, for example, if you say because everything I share with you here and anytime I ever talk about, it is empirically validated. It's not theoretical. It hasn't not been done. And it's usually been done many times over. But if somebody goes, well, that sounds really cool, but I'm afraid to take a big chance. There's no reason to take a big chance. You can test it out, then you can metric it. You try 3 or 4 people if it's legal, buy them glasses or whatever it would be, and you see how much business flows from it. If it's zero, you're out a few dollars. If it's multiples of that, and then you project what that business is worth, not just one time, but over forever, then you do more of it.
Well, go ahead. And you think about the power of, and this is when you were talking about lifetime value of a patient. For me, one of the categories that I always try to think about is not just how often are they going to come back, but who else are they going to tell? And that requires us to be a little bit more systematic about referrals. And, one thing that I think you're well known for is the number of referral systems that, you've developed over the years that you've been in business, and the way that the years that you've been advising businesses.
Yeah, I think that before I address that, I'd rather address the elephant in the room, and that's the flawed thinking about referrals. I would imagine, I don't know this because you and I haven't really talked to that extent about this, but I would imagine your industry generates a reasonable to significant majority of business from referrals or word of mouth. And I've done this all over the world, so I'm sure it would have the same relative result if we did it live with the people watching. But I have people stand up in an audience and say, how many of you stand up if you get at least 10% to 100% of your revenue from referral or word of mouth? And normally in a mixed audience, you're going to get at least 50%. With professionals, it's going to be skewed much higher.
Oh yeah, it's going to be, I think it'd be over, you said 10 to 100%. It's going to be everybody in the room.
So now everyone's standing, and then I'll say, okay, now only remain standing only if you have at least one formalized, systematized referral generating process in place that you adhere to constantly in your entire patient facing, in your case, team does. 95% sit down. Then I'll say if you have 2 remain standing, 95% of the 5 sit down. When you say 3, they all sit down. Now, because I've worked in 1,000 industries and I've meticulously interrogated all of them, we've identified 125 formal, systematic referral generating processes. And no one's going to do 125. They're not going to be 25. But if you do none and you do 3 or 4, it can double, redouble again. The referral generated business that comes, and a referral generated buyer, historically, they buy quicker, they buy more, they're more profitable, they buy more often, they refer more people, they cost you nothing, they're more enjoyable to deal with. But we're ruthlessly focused on all the interconnected drivers. Drivers are the same as levers of dramatically multiplied performance.
And they don't always have to be, and you can give an example of one, Jay, where it's not necessarily financial. It's not that I'm giving you $100 to refer me a patient, or
That's the least. That's the least.
Right.
No, you can basically have a special event. They bring someone. We have a law firm that deals with immigration, so it's a unique market. And I got them to basically, they basically have movie night. They'll buy out. I didn't realize it. There are Hispanic theaters. This is in the Southeast, and they buy out the theater and they invite all of their existing and past clients to bring another family. And that's a very easy one. You can basically just tell people. This is so funny. Well, let me tell a different story that will denominate what I want to say, because it's pretty fun. So years ago, Eugene, I had a newsletter subscription business as one of the many that I own. And I was the largest credit card merchant for this bank in our area. We were doing millions of dollars. And the bank manager every week would take me to lunch, and she was hot. And she was divorced. I was married. It was fun to go with her, and they paid, and we had lots of interesting discussion. And she was always lamenting that she could just get no dates. And she had all these people that she'd ask, and nobody got her any kind of dates. And after about 2 months of it, I said, okay, stop. I'm going to help you get dates. I said, the reason people aren't getting you dates is you're not helping them turn on their reticular activator and also understand what exactly you are looking for, and helping them see where that type of a person exists in their life. But I said, why don't you do this? When you go back from lunch this time, go back to everybody over the next week or so and say, I realized I've never told you the kind of a person I'm looking for. And we gave the age, like 35 to 50. He's a professional. He doesn't smoke. He can drink a bit. He's got to have humor. He's got to be athletic, but not fanatic. And we gave everything. And we could say he can be divorced if you know the reason why, and he's a really good guy. We went through everything, and we talked about where they might know them. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a former neighbor, maybe someone you grew up with, maybe church, maybe, and we defined everything. And that was it. So I didn't see her for a couple of weeks. The next time she sat down with me, she goes, you're not going to believe this. The week after you told me to do that, I had 8 dates. Now, the point I'm going to make analogous to that is you have to tell people who you're dealing with more about the people and the scenarios. If you say, wow, we never talked about this, but today we had the most wonderful referral come in, and we never tell you about it. They had this complex thing, and they needed a special setup, and we did it, and they were their mother, and she was very delicate. And we don't tell you, but you should always feel free to refer anyone and everyone you want. We'll always take care of them. If we don't think we can serve them, we'll tell them. If they want to get, and you could even defer. I mean, I don't know what the pricing structure. You could have if they're referred by you, they can get their exam gratis. I mean, you could do all kinds. I got so many variables, but the one thing not to do is be episodic, reactive, intermittent. That's such a waste of the most precious buying asset you could generate.
And I think that's just to hammer that point home, is that if you tell, and this is every time we've deployed a referral system for clients, I've had exactly the same experience, is that if you can be very specific about who you're looking for when you're looking for a referral, because it's not just we're here to serve everyone and anyone, but it's that, we truly specialize in X, whether that's serving families or whether that's making it convenient for mothers with children to come. Yeah. Right. I think, in the optometric space, a lot of practices really, they recognize that the female head of the household makes a lot of buying decisions for the home, and specifically makes a lot of the eye care appointments. And so that female head of the household, ages, let's just call it 35 to 50, is a desirable patient, and maybe even sometimes 45 to 60, because she might be they might be getting into presbyopia, which are more expensive lenses. And so you think about it and you kind of say, well, So who it is I'm looking for, or who we really truly specialize in helping, in making extra resources available to help families. If you're busy, we'll make sure that your appointments are scheduled together, that kind of thing. So who else do you know who needs that kind of support or help? Because we'd
and
love to
and
help
and
them.
and it's even more you could do. I mean, and that works, but you can even do it more gently. You can just tell scenarios that happened today, or you can basically, you don't want to lie, but you can anonymize and you can really do it. But one of the things is to show you taking what you just said to sublime. I was telling you about this law firm, and they're really wonderful because they follow everything I ask them. Because a lot of the families do, they have young kids and they don't have help, or they can't afford help. They can't afford to take off. So they work hours that are good. We'll pick them up and take them home. We've got a whole team that will watch the kids and feed them dinner if they want. And that might sound ludicrous, but you want to have preemptive advantage, and you want to show that I am sensitive. This is another dimension, but I'm sensitive to your reality. And I've been making you have to deal with mine. And that may not be fair. And it's certainly not going to optimize anything.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a really good point, Jay. Now let me, and I think you and I were just hitting some of the tips of the icebergs that are the body of your work. I'm sure you have hundreds of, if not thousands of different derivations and deviations. I know you have dozens of books that are available for people, but I think we're just hitting tips of the iceberg. But these are important concepts that if you start thinking about them and applying them in your business, I think they can make a meaningful difference. That's one of the reasons why I was excited to have you on the show, Jay. And hopefully you'd be willing to come back in the future. And I'm going to ask our listeners, and I have in previous shows, and certainly in this one, I want your feedback. If you go to the show website, and we're on YouTube. We're on the powerpractice.com website. But if you go to the show website, there's a way you can contact me directly, the host, and to give me some of your feedback. And I'm curious what other topics that Jay is talking about that you'd want to hear about. One of the things that Jay, I really would love to close with is a little bit more advice as to, we've talked about all these awesome concepts, but if I'm an optometrist, or if I work in a practice, and I might be a practice manager or an optometric technician, but I can do something different tomorrow. Where do I start? These are some phenomenal concepts, some amazing philosophy, but what's the one thing I should start thinking about differently, and how do I take action?
Well, I mean, what I always say is you have a critical mass, velocity, and momentum going on. You got things happening every day. People calling to learn about it, people making an appointment, people walking in with a purpose, people asking questions. You can start experimenting with different ways. That's very easy. You can do it today if they listen to this early in the morning, and see the differential. Now, you need to understand, by the way, that normally I gave you the unique scenario about the furniture store, but normally using benefit-based questions, are going to get a better response, but not always. So you could try articulating with questions that immediately uncover the superior benefit or the outcome people are using. I probably should close with the story that I always tell about a drill, because I think it's very telling. If you'd like.
Sure. Yes, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, this was in one of our early books, but I said, when somebody goes to a hardware store, Eugene and audience, to buy a drill, they don't want a drill. They want a hole. And they don't even want a hole. They want to fasten something. And they don't want to fasten something. They ultimately want the benefit. They want to watch their 85-inch big screen tonight, or they want their new water basin to have water flowing, or they want the new lock to, be secure. And when you understand that most people sell features, they don't sell benefits. And then I might say one more thing. You didn't get into it, and it's a longer, much richer topic, which is preeminence. But if you start realizing that you want to be the most trusted advisor, the only viable choice somebody can make for life, the way to do it is to fall in love with the patients you serve, and think not in terms, okay, I'm going to sell you glasses. I will see you in hopefully a year if you're diligent. You should think the moment they walk out, you've made their life so much more enhanced until the next time you see them. They're going to see clear. They're not going to blink. They're going to have more clarity. They're not, I mean, all these things. And when you realize how you enrich somebody's life, and it's how it permanently does that when your product or service is deployed in their life. When you really understand that, you, your team, everybody, if they really are on the same page and they're all on a crusade and a mission to make people's lives differently, to transform the quality of people's lives, not just for that moment because it's a good exam, or not for that moment because you got a very pretty facility, but for the rest of their life, because you're going to be in their life if you're the most trusted and only viable choice. And they sense that, it changes tremendously, Eugene, the impact you have, and the trust that they feel.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think this, if you can do one thing differently today, it's really to adopt this strategy of preeminence, which forces you to think about this concept that every single thing you do is for the benefit of your patients, and forces your team to think about it that way. But that also means that you are that it's truly, and we could do a whole show on preeminence, Jay. And so I'm trying to think of how I keep it short, but at the same time, it's such a powerful concept that I almost want to add the whole idea that, you know, we really undersell ourselves when we let our patients buy less than they should.
That's exactly right. I mean,
in less frequency than they should.
Yeah,
right?
The concept behind it is you have a moral obligation to not let them buy less than they should, in less quantity, quality, combination, frequency, not because you're going to be denied profit. They're going to be denied the optimal, no pun intended, outcome that they could get. And so preeminence is a very interesting dyad. On the one hand, it makes you so long-term oriented, but on the short hand, you don't just let them buy what they want. I mean, again, so with the analogy, I'll make it real quick, and this is not good. It's as if I had Jay Abraham's bottled water shop and water bar, and this should be half full. I got one half full, and this is half full.
And this is an ad for us on YouTube. If you're used to listening to the show, and if you're just used to listening to the show in audio format, now you got to go on video so you can see Jay's half full bottle of water.
So if you came in today and I had this water bottle shop and bar, and you wanted to buy a glass of water, and I took your money without first making sure that you know that in order for your body to function properly, your cellular structure to be nourished, your brain chemistry to work, your focus to be there, your sleep to be optimal, your digestion and elimination to work. If I didn't try to explain to you, Eugene, you need 7.5 more. And if you don't want to get it from me, it's okay, but I need you to know that. And I would prefer selling you those and sitting with you till you consume them. And then if you decide not to, at least I've done my moral right. If you came every other day to buy 8 glasses, and I didn't do the same thing about telling you about missing the days in between, I would be denying you what I believe was in your best interest. Now, you could obviously decline that, but most people don't give you their best reason, most professional opinion on what's in your best interest. They just take the money from whatever you want to buy. And I think that's a disservice, because I don't think people always know what's in their best interest.
Feel when you're truly in their service and you're trying to be the highest and most valued advisor, as opposed to you're just trying to make a sale. I think there's a difference, and it's sometimes on the surface it feels a little nuancy, but I really think it's a fundamental shift. As somebody who I think I've dedicated my entire business career to trying to be preeminent with our clients and teaching your clients around about preeminence and communicating preeminently, I really this is truly a concept that cannot be understated. I think
it's quite profound, and it's transformed many of my clients. The majority of my clients have gained stature as the preemptive business or practice in their field. We took as an example doing this in Japan. I used to do a lot of things in Japan. We took a one office cosmetic surgery group, and now they have 87, and they're blowing everybody else away because they took the concept of preeminence to the infinity and below. beyond. So anyhow, I hope this helps.
This is phenomenal, Jay, and I'm so grateful for you joining us today. And again, hopefully you, I'd certainly love your company in future shows. Now, for our audience, again, you'll be able to find some additional information about Jay Abraham on the podcast website and in the show notes. We're going to do a better job of making sure that all of that is available. There's a little video about Jay as well. And I, as your host, I'm fully committed. I'm so honored to be able to share the stage with Jay today. And I think the reality is that, you can see why it is that I really wanted to bring him on and share some of his wisdom that's helped him with the tens of thousands of clients that he's advised. But in reality, we want your feedback. I encourage everybody to take action from this episode. And one of the components of action you can take is you can go to the Power Practice website and click on the show website and give me some feedback and also request some additional information. I think the Power Practice is making some of Jay's content available to you, but it's also there are also other things that could be available to you to help you take action in your business. Because if a conversation like this, when you think about the ways you can grow your business, doesn't necessarily it shouldn't just be intellectual entertainment. It should be a catalyst for growth. And Jay, I'm so grateful that you could be a huge resource for everybody listening today on the Power Hour.
And Eugene, thank you. But I do want to do a little plug for you. I've watched your career grow, and I want to acknowledge you because I think you're a unique factor in a world that doesn't really care as much about always the betterment of the client. You've done it dedicated, and I know the kind of clients that you've grown. Pretty impressive, man. And I just wanted to acknowledge it. I have nothing personal to gain from that, but I've been so impressed by the integrity and the preeminence and the contributions and the impact you've made to so many people in your industry. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jay. And again, I was so grateful to have you on. And everyone, thanks for listening to the Power Hour today. We'll see you in the next show. If you're enjoying the Power Hour, you might be asking yourself, what can I do today in my practice that's going to make an impact? So over the years, the practice coaches and consultants at the Power Practice have helped thousands of practices improve. And they often start with one thing, and that's a proprietary methodology called the Practice Profitability Audit. For about $2,400, they look at all of your practice numbers and they stack them up against where a practice of your size could and should be. It takes about a week for them to do. And because they're so experienced, they know what your potential looks like. And they're often able to take that $2,400, multiply it several times over, and hand it right back to you in found profits in your practice in months, not years, in months. But you get to keep the much more profitable practice for years afterwards. But here's the best news. I'm going to tell you how you can have the Practice Profitability Audit completely free. See, we're really trying to get people onto the show website, which is, by the way, powerpractice.com, and then you click the Power Hour podcast button. The reason we want you there is because I want the audience participation. I want to hear your feedback, and I want to know how to make the show better for you. So you can interact with us, send us your feedback, offer your suggestions, and for a limited time when you go there, you can also request a Practice Profitability Audit for free. Right, we're going to cover 100% of the cost, but only for 5 people per month. And 5 people per month is all we really have capacity for because this is a resource-intensive audit, and the Power Practice coaches are generally busy serving their clients. But for 5 people a month, they've agreed to cover 100% of the cost, so it's totally free to you. So again, take action immediately in your practice. Go to powerpractice.com, click on the Power Hour podcast, interact with us, but also request a Practice Profitability Audit today.